r/nosleep. Hosted by you/Saturdead. That summer, I had no face. Hello Reddit. My name is Aaliyah, 33F, or Leah for short. After an incident at work, I've been ordered to go through a mandatory minimum of 8 sessions of therapy. As part of my recovery, I've been advised to talk openly about a traumatic experience. However, as they didn't specify who to talk about it with, I figured I could use a public forum. I may be skirting the intentions a bit, but this was doomed to fail from the start. So let's talk about it. The summer when I didn't have a face. Just looking at that sentence seems ridiculous. It was one of those events that were so far disconnected from every other part of my life that, looking back at it, it doesn't seem real. Like something that happened to someone else, and I've just been retelling the story to myself over and over. But it was as real as it gets, and to this day, I'm not sure what to make of it. Now, I want to be clear, they call this a delusion. I've gone through countless personality tests and trauma care, and they've given this many names, delusion being the most common. But I refuse to let myself be gaslit. This was real, and no one can tell me otherwise. I can admit my wrongdoings in every aspect of my life but this. Back in the summer of 2001, I was 11 years old. I'd been playing with my friend Imani over at her place all day, and we kind of forgot the time. I was supposed to come straight home after having dinner at her place, but we got stuck watching The Emperor's New Groove. So when the movie was over, I realized I was in big trouble. Mom was always a bit overprotective. As her only daughter and proclaimed miracle baby, I had a lot of expectations riding on me. It was already dark outside, but the fastest way to get home was the path next to Frog Lake. I wasn't allowed to go there because the streetlights were broken, but they'd be mad either way, so whatever. If I had to go through the park at night, for whatever reason, I was to go straight through, no matter what. That was my plan, at least. I was about halfway through the park, panting like a racehorse. One of my braids had come loose and kept poking my nose, making me stop to sneeze every 200 feet or so. I tried my best to keep running all the way through, but it got so dark I almost walked off the road. I had to slow down to catch my breath and navigate. You did not want to get lost near Frog Lake, or you'd drown. That, or the frogmen would drag you into the lake and force you to drink tadpoles. That's what the adults kept telling us, at least. I stopped at a branch in the road to consider the fastest way home when I heard someone crying. Not a big cry, but a soft little one. A sniffling, like from a kid even smaller than I was. I knew I should have kept running, like Mom told me to, but it just made me too sad. I had to check if they were okay. I caught my breath and looked around, only to see someone on a park bench down the path to my left. They were underneath the only working streetlight, so I got a good look at them. She was a girl my age, with these little bantu knots and a bright blue summer dress. She was curled up on the bench, burying her face in her knees. And while my mom always taught me to be obedient, she also taught me to follow my heart. So I did. I sat down on the bench next to her. She kept sniffling and weeping, but it was so faint, like she'd done it all day. I scooched a bit closer. "Hi," I said. "I'm Leah." She didn't answer. She just turned her back on me. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Why are you crying?" Everyone is bad," she said. "They're bad, and I hate them." "Why? What did they do?" "They put this stupid bracelet on, and I can't get it off," she sniffled. "They said it's an ugly girl's bracelet." She held her arm out, and it was this strange copper-like bracelet with little squares linked with iron rings. There were these white silhouettes of people etched into every other square, with splotches of an iron red color in between. I'd never seen anything like it, and the sides looked really sharp. Like, sharp enough to cut yourself with. It didn't look safe. "Let me see," I said, taking her hand and scooching even closer. There was no immediate way to take it off, but the rings were a bit damaged. I inched it closer to my mouth, gnawed on it a bit, and managed to make a dent. With that, I pulled it apart. I did get a small cut on my lip though, the sides were really sharp. As the bracelet came off, the sniffles stopped. The girl turned to me. "Thanks, Leah," she said. "I've waited all day for someone to help me." And as she turned around, she smiled at me. Her eyes weren't red from crying. Her nose wasn't wet with snot. She looked perfectly normal. And she had my face. I just looked at her for a moment. She waved at me, now bracelet free, and skipped away into the night, giggling with excitement. The bracelet, still in my hand, crumbled into rust. The light above, the only working light on the street, flickered. Something about it just felt wrong, and I got back on my feet. I ran home as fast as I could. When I got home, my dad was waiting by the door. I shut the door behind me, kicked off my shoes, and ran headfirst into him, crying my eyes out. I hadn't even noticed that I had this shiver. Maybe it was just adrenaline running off. I hugged his sweater and cried. After a few seconds, I noticed he wasn't moving. No pats on the back, no comforting words. No cute nicknames or kisses on the cheek. I stepped back and looked up at him. He was holding his hands out, like he was ready to defend himself. His eyes had gone wide, and his mouth hung open like a fish out of water. He'd never looked at me like that before. Never. Dad? He fell backwards and knocked over a lamp. He crawled away from me, desperate to put distance between us. Jada. He called out. Jada. I couldn't stop crying. I was scared and I didn't understand. He looked at me like I was a wild animal, when all I wanted was my dad. He hurried into the backyard, calling out to my mother over and over. He had this high-pitched note that I hadn't heard before, like he'd been hurt. I just sat down on the floor, buried my face between my knees, and cried. My tears felt strange on the skin of my knees. I sat there for a couple of minutes until I heard a door open. I didn't look up. I was scared to see my dad like that again. Leah, sweetie? It was my mom. Honey, are you there? I got back on my feet. It was my mom, on the other side of the room. She'd blindfolded herself with a towel from the bathroom. I'm here, Mom. Leah, honey, can you come here? I walked up to her, but when I was about 6 feet away, she held up a hand, urging me to stop. Slowly, honey, she said. Come here. She held out her hands. Looking back at it, I think she wanted to be sure I didn't try to take off her blindfold. We held hands, and she tried her best to smile. Did you go by the lake? She asked. I need you to be honest with me. I didn't want to be late. You'd be mad. So you went by the lake, right? I took a deep breath and slumped my shoulders. My mom held my hands in a tight grip. Yeah, I admitted. I'm sorry. My mom swallowed. I could hear her struggling to keep her breath steady. She was right there, on the edge of panic. We're gonna fix this, honey, she said. We're gonna fix this. She made her way back to the kitchen and pulled out a paper bag. She told me we were playing a game, and that I would get a prize if I kept the bag on. I was allowed to make holes for the eyes, if I kept sunglasses on underneath. But I couldn't take it off. If I did, I had to warn them first. All the while I could see my dad in the backyard, retching his guts up. You gotta keep the bag on, honey, Mom said. You gotta promise. I promised. That night, my dad could barely look at me. All he could give me was quick glances, and I could tell it was painful to him. He wanted to hug me, to care for me, but he was too scared. I'd never seen my dad scared of anything, and having him scared of me was heartbreaking. I could see the conflict in him. At least now he was back to calling me his little Leah. It was a start. My mom made me a sandwich and chocolate milk, but I had to eat it in my room. As soon as I was done, I had to put the bag back on. That first night, I sat by the edge of my bed and ate my sandwich in silence. The crust was cut off, like always. My mom was waiting just outside the door, but she couldn't come in as long as my paper bag was off. I didn't understand. How could I? Mom? I said. What's happening? Something bad happened, honey, she said. But we're gonna fix it. You're gonna be okay. I feel okay, Mom. I know you do, honey. You're doing great. You just have to be patient. Can Amani come over tomorrow? I'm sorry, no. She can't come over until you're better. But we were gonna listen to CDs. I'm sorry, honey. When I finished, and put my bag back on, my mom came to my room and left a glass of water, toothpaste, and a toothbrush. I couldn't brush my teeth in the bathroom, for some reason. Bag off, brushing, bag on again. Mom said good night through the door. I could hear her sobbing as she went back downstairs. I couldn't sleep that night. I twisted and turned for hours on end, but my pulse just wouldn't go down. Finally, I decided to use the bathroom. Stretch my legs for a bit. Only then did I realize they'd blocked my door. Standing there, turning the knob over and over, I realized I was stuck. I could hear my parents arguing downstairs, through the door. Snippets of a longer, angrier, conversation. I'm gonna call them, Dad said. First thing in the morning, we're calling them. You think they'll help us? You think they'll just do that, out of the goodness of their hearts? What are we gonna do then? Have you forgotten what it cost us last time? What are we gonna do then? Have you forgotten what we paid? I haven't forgotten a goddamn thing, but what are we gonna do then? We're dealing with this. You and me. We're dealing with this. There was a quiet that hung in the air. Something that Mom had said sounded bad. Like dealing with this was a bad thing. We're gonna need a gun. I woke up early the next morning, still leaning against the door. When my mom finally let me out, she had a few rules for me to follow until everything got sorted out. I was to stay inside. Above everything, I couldn't go outside. This was for my own protection, apparently. Secondly, I was to not look at my own reflection. Not through puddles, a reflection in the windows, the bathroom mirror, anything. No looking at myself. Third, I could not touch my own face without gloves. The gloves I was given turned out to be oven mitts. And finally, if I ever took off the paper bag, or whatever they chose to conceal me with, I had to tell them about it in advance. That first day was the worst. I kept getting this awful claustrophobic feeling, like I was stuck in that damn bag. I had trouble breathing, and I felt trapped. Once, I took it off without warning my mom, but she managed to shield her eyes before it was too late. When I put the bag back on, I could tell she was furious. For a moment, I thought she was going to hit me. She'd never looked at me like that before. Please. You can't just take it off, she said. Never do that. Never again. Dad just wasn't around. He was out all day, and only came back to fetch something from the garage. He and Mom talked for a bit on the driveway, then he was off again. He looked like he'd been crying. All the while, I was walking around with my face concealed and oven mitts covering my hands. Mom had taken down all mirrors, and Dad had covered the windows with brown packing tape. While I wasn't allowed to go anywhere, my mom still tried her best to keep me calm. She made me popcorn and allowed me to talk to Imani on the phone, as long as I didn't say anything about being sick. We didn't talk for long. I ended up listening to my new Destiny's Child CD on my own. That memory of sitting on the floor of my childhood room, wearing that bag and a pair of oven mitts, is burned into my mind. While Mom was busy, I remembered my jewelry box. It had mostly plastic rings and clip-on earrings, but it had a built-in mirror on the inside of the lid. If I wanted to, I could see what the fuss was about. I dug it out and called out to Mom that I was taking off the bag in my room for a while. That way I'd at least get a warning knock before she entered. So I sat there, box in hand. I took off my oven mitts and opened it. As soon as the lock clicked, I got this chill up my spine. Like dipping your toes in cold water, knowing you're about to wade out into the deep. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but it wasn't just wrong because Mom said so, but because I was doing something I shouldn't be able to do. I was breaking more than just rules. Still, I opened the box. Slowly. As soon as I saw the edge of my reflection, I heard something. A laugh in the distance, like a looming thunderstorm. A bright, joyous shriek. I slammed the box shut, and the laugh was reduced to a giggle, then nothing. My hands were so warm that I could feel my fingers sweating. I could have sworn the box was hurting me. Still, I had to try again. I had to know. I clicked the lid open again, and heard a plastic crackle. It wasn't coming from the box, but something in the room. Looking around, I didn't see anything obvious. I could hear my heart beating through my chest. Then I looked up. My toys had moved. Every doll, every stuffed animal. Their heads were turned towards me. I closed my eyes, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. I opened lid just a little, and heard another crack. And again, the distant laugh. But now, it was more like a hysterical cackle. Almost mechanical, repeating in the same pattern, louder and louder. I saw my own throat. My skin looked ashen and dry. I could see my discolored veins. Every set of eyes, on every poster, turned towards me. And it was only now that I noticed that everything looked different. Every toy, every picture, anything with a pair of eyes, the entire room was staring at me, intently. Their eyes had changed color. They looked like mine. I kept opening the box, slowly. Something in me wanted to close it, to throw it away. There was a banging noise, like distant thunder. And that ever-growing laugh. I saw my chin. Withered skin, breaking into something pale. I held my hand up, about to touch my own face. To feel it out. I know I shouldn't. I know there were rules. But in the edge of the reflection, I saw my hand come closer. And as I touched my chin with the edge of my index finger, I swear, I felt bone. Then my reflection moved. My mom burst through the door. She'd been trying to get my attention by banging on the door, but it was as if I'd been hypnotized. She came in with her eyes closed, wielding a hammer from Dad's toolbox. "Put it down!" she screamed. "Put it down now!" I put down the jewelry box. Seconds later, she fell to her knees and smashed it to pieces. She kept hitting it, over and over, until her arm grew weak. When she couldn't hit it anymore, she just dropped the hammer to the floor. She ripped a pillowcase from my bed and wrapped it around my head. When I could no longer see her, she took her blindfold off and wrapped her arms around me. She cried in a way I'd never seen before, like a wailing child. These big, hulking sobs. She hugged me so tight that I had trouble breathing through the pillowcase. "Leah. Leah, please," she cried. "You have to listen to me. You have to listen." "I'm sorry, Mom." "I'm sorry too, honey. I'm so sorry." That night made me realize that there was more to this than I understood. My mom and dad were doing this for a good reason. I decided to just hunker down and do what I was told. To see this as being sick, watching movies, eating snacks, and just waiting for it to be over. I didn't mind anymore. We were in this together. Over the next few days, things started to turn into a new kind of normal. I spent most of my time with Mom just hanging out, watching TV, playing games on our shared computer. I was obsessed with The Sims, and I got to play as much as I wanted. Mom would sit next to me, asking me about the characters and the stories I was making up. She even let me take off the oven mitts, as long as I kept the bag on. We'd also made a cover using the pillowcase she'd ripped up, so I had a more comfortable option. But I was often reminded that something was wrong. Dad wouldn't come home until late in the night, and I had to keep lying to Imani about why we couldn't hang out. Mom just gave me this apologetic look, but didn't say anything. We trusted one another now. It was a white lie. Everything would be okay. I lived like that for 3 weeks. I stopped questioning it. I stopped trying. I went through the motions and hoped it'd be over. Sometimes I'd sit by a gap in my taped-up window, just watching the people outside pass me by, much like the Sims in my game. At times, I imagined them turning towards me, looking at me with my own eyes. Sometimes, they really did. One night, when Dad came back, something was wrong. They usually talked a little, and then he went straight to bed. This time, they sat up long into the night. My mom had stopped locking me in my room, so I sneaked out to listen. They were being more quiet than usual, and I couldn't help myself. "We gotta bring her," Dad said. "She has to be there." "We can't," Mom cried. "We can't, she'll never be the same." "You said we should handle it. This is how we handle it." "But she doesn't have to be there. We can just." "She has to be there, and she has to do it." The next day, Dad didn't go anywhere. He sat with me while Mom prepared breakfast. He gave Mom a long look, sighed, and turned to me. I met his eyes from behind my sunglasses. "Leah, honey, we're going on a trip tonight." "Outside?" Yeah, he smiled. "We're going out on a trip. But I need you to be very careful, and to listen really closely. Can you do that?" "Sure, yeah," I nodded. "Where are we going?" "We're gonna make you okay, honey." "You are?" Dad nodded. He kept his smile firm, but it wasn't genuine. I could tell. That night, Mom and Dad came into my room. I wrapped my head in a new pillowcase that didn't have any holes for my eyes. I couldn't see, and they also gave me a pair of earmuffs. I couldn't hear, couldn't see, and had trouble breathing through the fabric. Mom gave me a big hug. "You can do this," she said. "Stay strong, be patient, and do what you need to do." They took me to the car, put me in the back seat, and drove off. I heard them talking in the background, but the earmuffs blocked most of it. I picked up a yeah or a no every now and then. I just sat there with my arms crossed, trying my best to stay calm. Whatever was going on felt bad. Again, like we were doing something we shouldn't. I could feel the road shift. It went from smooth asphalt to gravel, and then a bumpy dirt road. I had to steady myself against the door to keep my earmuffs on. I could hear a low sorry, honey from my mom. I reminded myself to do what she said. Be patient. Be strong. After what felt like an eternity, the car stopped. Still seeing nothing, the car door opened, and a hand lead me outside. I'd recognize Mom's hand anywhere. It was all I needed to feel safe. She lead me through a forest path, down a short hill, and into a clearing. Mom and Dad asked each other really quiet questions. Mostly just 1 or 2 words. The only one I caught was "Here?" Finally, I heard my dad shout something. Mom pushed the earmuffs closer together, blocking everything but my own heartbeat. I could feel water seeping into my sneakers. There was an argument. Something loud and angry. Dad rushed past me, I felt the texture of his jacket brush against my arm. Another scream. A back and forth. Mom took off the earmuffs. She put something warm in my hands, something heavy. Something metallic. You have to take it off, Dad said. She has to see her. It has to transfer. Mom didn't respond. She just kept sobbing as she unwrapped the pillowcase. Everything was blurry while my eyes adjusted. Shades of black and withered green. Blue petals from a flower crushed under my sneaker. We were deep in the woods. I could feel a faint breeze, making the hairs on my arm stand up. I felt nothing on my face, however. Nothing at all. And right there, collapsed in the soggy moss, was the little girl I'd met by Frog Lake. She was tied up and placed on the ground in front of me. I was holding a handgun. I didn't know it at the time, but the safety was off. Honey, listen, said Mom. You have to do this. It has to be you. Don't think, just point at it and squeeze the trigger, okay? Leah, honey, follow my lead. Dad was standing on the side, closing his eyes. His hands were bloody. The girl dropped in front of me looked like me. But there was something off about her. I couldn't quite put my finger on a single thing. It wasn't just the hair, there were slight differences overall. Her eyes were a little further apart, her chin a bit longer. She looked like me, but it wasn't really me. It's not fair. The girl screamed. You made a deal. Don't listen to it, honey. Don't listen. Just aim down the side end. She came to me willingly. She set me loose. You owe me. It's evil. It's not human. You can't listen, Leah. I looked at the girl who had my eyes. My face. They threw me away just to get you, she spat. What makes you so special? Why'd you get to be? What's she saying, Mom? I asked. What does she mean? Leah, just do what I tell you to. Be strong. Be. There are no miracles. The girl screamed. Some prices are just higher than others. There are no miracles. You are no miracle. I could see her losing herself. The bone structure of her skull pushing against my ill-fitting face. Eyes losing their color. Hair withering, as her scalp was laid barren, Bantu knots dropping like little pine cones. She shrieked at me with a manic smile on my face. She was becoming less of a girl, and more of a thing. One or none, they said. One or none. One or none. She twitched closer before my dad put his boot on her back, pushing her into the wet moss. Guess which one of us got the one, and which one got dumped in a lake with nothing but a fucking bracelet. I looked up at my mom. She met my gaze. She couldn't help but to look at me, and she saw something she shouldn't have. I don't know what she looked at in that moment, but her eyes dilated and a scream got stuck in her throat. Her eyes crossed as she fell backwards, struggling to breathe. My dad came up behind me, pointed my head forward, and aimed my arms for me. All I had to do was pull the trigger, and I'd save everyone. Mom. Dad. I'd get my face back. Remember this, the girl thing purred. Remember this every time you look yourself in that goddamn mirror, little miracle. I squeezed the trigger, and the gun went off. For a moment, the world stood still. In the muzzle flash, I had this brief image of sitting on that park bench next to Frog Lake, holding hands with a sister I never had. A sister that was never truly born, dropped unceremoniously into the depths of the lake. A promise fulfilled to a power below. But in that eternal moment, in the white flash of the gun, we were just sitting on the bench together. Holding hands. What happened afterwards is a bit of a blur. My mom was taken to the hospital. I didn't have to wear the pillowcase anymore. My dad threw the gun in a lake. And then, we never talked about any of that ever again. Not that we got much chance to. Weeks later, my mom got diagnosed with cervical cancer. She lasted 4 years. My dad died of a brain aneurysm on my 17th birthday. I moved out of Tomskog, Minnesota to live with my aunt in West Virginia. I'd spend my time at the computer. It started with mods for games and slowly turned into front-end programming. Got a nice job, nice benefits, and a move to Orlando to work at a proper office. I've been working there ever since, going on. 11 years. It feels strange putting this all to paper. I've had no one to talk to about it, and medical professionals don't really agree with the whole notion of giving their mental patient the benefit of the doubt. There was an incident at work. We'd closed a deal with a large client, and my boss was doing this pep talk where we all went around the room with a mirror to psych ourselves up. We were to say an amazing thing about ourselves. When I looked at myself, I was going to say I had a great sense of humor. But my words got stuck in my mouth. Looking back at me was me. But not really. It was me, but I had band 2 knots in my hair. And then I saw myself blink. I don't really know what happened after that. I broke the mirror and tried to stab someone with a cake knife, apparently. I was carried out by security and put on immediate medical leave. They'd never had a problem with me before, and I'm team lead in a group of 9 people, so they're not eager to get rid of me. Now I can't stress this enough, I'm fine. This hasn't happened before. I think, if anything, this had to do with my boss calling me a miracle worker, and it triggered something in me. Maybe something out there lives on, through me. And maybe that something wants, desperately, to come back.